Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. This movie of course stars Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, directed by Sean Levy, along with so many other people that are in this film, which I'll get into when I get into the spoilers for Deadpool and Wolverine. But this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of video and just a little peek behind the curtain. I work at a movie theater, which is why I get all these awesome posters that I have in the background of all my videos. And well, it's the opening weekend of the biggest movie of the entire year, and yeah, I've only been working a day since this movie has been out, and it's been incredibly hectic. And so I'm completely exhausted. I am very tired. And so I'm going to run through this movie as quickly as I can for this spoiler review because I have work in like an hour and it's going to be really busy and I'm probably going to get yelled at for one reason or another, but it's going to be fun in general. And so let's get into Deadpool and Wolverine. And again, spoilers, if you have not seen this movie, go check it out. Be nice to the staff working at the theaters. They're trying their best with the understaffed, ability that they have to be able to, have enough people to handle the 3,000 people a day that are walking into the theater. So let's just jump right into the movie. But before I jump into the movie itself, I want to talk about, my initial thoughts after watching this movie for the first time. And that was that it was a decent movie. It was a good MCU movie and it's a great Marvel movie. And I think that really applies to everything in this film. And I think the expectation I had going into this, especially, I watched the first two Wolverine movies and then I watched the first two Deadpool movies and I watched Logan immediately before watching this movie. And I think that might have been the wrong order to watch these. And I think the correct order would be the Wolverine trilogy and then the Deadpool trilogy after that. But I think watching the movies in that order kind of set the tone for me that, this is going to be a more serious movie. But no, it's a Deadpool movie. Deadpool has always been an incredibly unserious character. And so when you bring in all these characters and you have them in a really fun, wacky story, it's going to be fun and wacky. It's not going to be taken as seriously as maybe you want it to be as an audience member. So when you pull in these really crazy cameos that we'll get into here in a second, maybe it's undercut a little bit because you're in a Deadpool movie, but, that's neither here nor there. So let's just get into the movie itself. And if I look off screen, a couple times throughout this, I'm trying to do this all in as much as one take as I possibly can, and so I will be looking at my notes while doing this, so I just want to go scene by scene. So the first thing I do want to talk about is just the opening Backstreet Boys fight scene, which I love this fight scene. I thought it was incredibly well directed. Of course, it has that Deadpool feel where you're, having fun with a title sequence. It doesn't have the fun text that the other two movies had, in accompanying with the crazy thing that you're watching on screen, but to see him, use Wolverine's, corpse as a weapon against all these TVA agents was really fun to see. But also, again, this is a Deadpool movie. It's incredibly unserious. I think an initial gut reaction that somebody might have watching this would be they're literally desecrating the body of Logan that is directly following the fact that I just watched the Logan movie and I just saw him be buried by X-23, and there's a lot of emotional weight in that scene, and to see his body be used in that way immediately after that is an incredibly jarring way to watch this movie. But of course they are very self-referential when it comes to that sort of thing. They're very, tongue-in-cheek when they talk about, Deadpool is aware that he just desecrated the body of a legend, and people kind of shame him for doing that throughout this entire movie. And so, yeah, I think this movie firmly has his tongue in his cheek into a way where I don't mind that as much as, I think some people might. But then we get the entire setup of this movie in general with, the family and the TVA, which I thought was a decent setup for the story. I think the really unique position that these Deadpool movies are in is the fact that they each flow into each other in a very unexpected way. Obviously, you have the first movie, or even back with X-Men Origins Wolverine, and you have Deadpool in that movie, and you have him butchered as much as he has in that. When you get a solo Deadpool movie, they really fought for that thing to be made. That movie was a lightning in a bottle. It was just, it was the circumstances that kind of built to that thing, and a lot of luck, also built up to make that movie exist in the first place. This movie that should not exist in any way whatsoever. And so, of course, with that movie being as popular as it was, it got a sequel, and that sequel, they teased Cable in it, and they really, they paid off that tease in a very strong way with actually having Cable in that movie. And with the last movie, you have the whole time travel thing that happened at the end of it that was kind of played as a post-credit joke, but also, yeah, sure, he screwed with time, and bringing in a time travel multiversal story with the TVA, which didn't exist at the time which Deadpool 2 was released. I think that's really cool to be able to bring in the TVA into this Deadpool movie now that you have these universes kind of smashing together, and you have the MCU characters and you have the Fox X-Men characters all coming together in one story. I think it's a really unique way to bring it all together. And so to have the TVA go to him because he has a greater purpose in the universe of the MCU is a cool way to bring him into the MCU in general. But I think the thing that I really loved about this is the fact that this is the TVA, and I love the TVA. Loki is maybe my favorite MCU project in general, especially after season 2. I love the concepts that the TVA uses. I love the idea that they introduced a new way of how a timeline dies, which essentially if you have this anchor being killed inside of a universe and it slowly starts to fade away into obscurity, which is again a very meta way to talk about these universes that kind of, faded away into obscurity. Of course, the X-Men franchise in general, it really did kind of go out in a whimper. And so to bring it all together in this way, I thought was a really creative and inventive way. I think the only thing that I have a problem with is I wish, this movie is like 2 hours and 7 minutes, I believe. I wish we got another 10-15 minutes just to set up this movie before we got into this, time travel multiversal story, especially when it comes to the original characters from those Deadpool movies, because I think of everybody, I think all of them were undercut, seriously, except for Peter. I think Peter had a great role to play in this film, but I love Morena Baccarin as VANESSA. I thought that core relationship that they had in that first Deadpool movie is the reason why that movie worked, and I think that both the sequel and now this movie entirely missed the point of why that first movie worked, which is that core romance and relationship between those two characters, and to kill that character, to fridge her in that second movie was a giant mistake. To bring her back was a positive, but now we have this movie, and the movie has so many other things that it wants to do, and it's really fun to do that stuff. That's Morena Baccarin gets, undercut once again in this movie, and I think that is a damn shame, because I think she's a great actress, and I think that, her role could have been even more integral into this film, and I'm kind of sad that we don't get to see Yukio and Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Colossus and all these other characters that we've come to love in, those previous two movies. That's, yeah, I was a little bummed that they were only in a short little bit at the beginning of the movie, but, 15 minutes in, we're out on our universal or multiversal adventure with the TVA and with Wolverine and all that stuff, which is great to get into that stuff right away, but I wish there was more of an emotional pull with this Deadpool character when it comes to the original cast. What made this character as entertaining was the people surrounding him. But what are the actual stakes of this movie? Well, essentially, since you had that anchor being killed in the world of, this X-Men universe with Wolverine, with Logan at the end of his film, well, now you're having his universe fade into obscurity, and so the TVA wants to pull him out so they can, use this time ripper that, the Paradox character wants to use to, kind of speed up the process to get rid of this timeline, because he kind of has an older mentality, because obviously the TVA went through a lot of development in both seasons of Loki, but you have this guy who's kind of going rogue in his own little team with that one guy, that one little agent that is in the background making weird faces towards Deadpool the entire time, which he was honestly a highlight of the time. I think my two favorite characters in this movie is that guy and Baby Knife, and maybe Dogpool. I think those three elements in this movie just really added a lot of humor in a very fun way. But the fact that, the whole reason why Deadpool is going to look for another Logan is because he wants to replace his anchor being to save his own universe. And again, I love the higher concepts that these, Loki TVA kind of storylines can create when it comes to those weird timey-wimey storylines in this either movie or series. I love all that stuff, and I thought they did a really great job at bringing something from the TV shows into a movie in a very satisfying way that they have yet to do so far. I think Wanda was a decent way to bring that in Multiverse of Madness. I think it kind of transferred over decently. I don't think it worked as well for everybody as, I think Marvel wanted, or at least hoped for, but I think the TVA translated perfectly onto the big screen. And seeing Hunter B-15 also have a little romantic, little twinkle in her eye towards Peter was one of my favorite jokes in the entire movie. I love Hunter B-15. If you haven't seen Loki, if you've just seen, these X-Men movies or these Deadpool movies, watch Loki. I think Loki has so much great stuff in it. But then we get a really fun montage of Deadpool looking for a new Wolverine, and, you have a lot of great, cameos in that. You get the Short King Wolverine, that was a really funny joke. You get the original Wolverine that was fighting against, Hulk, and I wish there was a little bit more with a fight between Wolverine and Hulk. I think everybody's going to say that, but at the same time, this movie had a lot on its mind. That would have been, been a really big, CGI spectacle. I think maybe they'll save that for something in the future, but either way, it was cool to see that. You had that weird 90s Wolverine. You had the Wolverine that was strung up on a cross, which is apparently another comic storyline that they're paying homage to. And then you got the Henry Cavill cameo and the joke about how he was not treated well across the street over at DC. That was all great. I think it kind of showed the proof of concept of the fan casting of this in a way that they also did with John Krasinski as Reed Richards. I don't think that's actually going to come into fruition besides this one joke. I wish the best for Henry Cavill. I just don't think that he's going to be actually cast as the Wolverine. If he does, I think he would be a decent choice, but I think that take will be a little bit too similar to what we got already with Hugh Jackman. And I think Kevin Feige said something at Comic-Con or at the premiere that was like, we'll eventually cast another Wolverine, but when we do that, it's going to be a completely completely different take that won't, take away from what we had as, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. And I think that is kind of needed because Wolverine is very different in the comics and in, the animated series than Hugh Jackman's portrayal. And I think Hugh Jackman had a very strong staple on this character, and he was great in this movie and as his character in general, but he's not quite the comic character that we had, before this point. And he's kind of defined this character in a new, unique way that is specifically tied to him. And so I think Henry Cavill would have been a little bit too similar to, I guess, Hugh Jackman's take as a character. But Deadpool, of course, finds a new Wolverine to bring over to Paradox to say, okay, this is the new guy that I want to, put in our universe to be the new anchor of, my reality. And that is, of course, the worst Wolverine that he possibly could have gotten, that Paradox makes fun of him for it. And then they prune him and they go over to the Void. And that is when we get the entire, cameos galore section of the second act of this movie. In the first one, of course, you get Chris Evans back as Johnny Storm, as one of the members of the Fantastic Four, rather than, his Captain America character that everybody is kind of expecting him to be. And as soon as he popped up on screen, I was 100% convinced that he was going to be Johnny Storm. I not for a second was fooled that it was going to be Captain America, because of course you're in a multiversal X-Men crossover with the MCU. The funniest thing that Ryan Reynolds and the team could have done is to make him Johnny Storm instead of Captain America. And of course that is exactly what they did. And, I think that this is another moment where I said, this movie is incredibly unserious. This is a Deadpool movie. And so when he, flames on and he flies into the sky and his powers are all sucked away from Pyro, because of course that fire ability is, it made sense that he was going to be able to be a good, form of antagonist for this character. But of course he falls from the sky, hits his nuts on this weird, this thing sticking out of the sand, and then he falls, and you think that maybe he died right then and there. And I honestly would have been surprised if they did that, if they handle it in that way, because that's kind of how they handled some of the, surprise cameos in Multiverse of Madness. And so I think that was in line with what they have done in the past, but also in a very Deadpool way. And so, like I said, they are treating these cameos in an extremely unserious way. They're not kind of, they don't feel like they're ripped exactly from their exact movies. It's very meta. They have a lot of jokes that to the character's expense as well to the actor's expense. And so when it comes to these cameos, I do think they're not necessarily lights, just useless cameos. They do have enough of a role that make them fun and entertaining to see in this movie. But again, they're treated in a very unserious way. And I think if you're going to this movie expecting them to have a bunch of cameos and to have these characters be, really great, to have their own character arc and to have a very important role in this film, they're not really going to have that. Again, it's going to be all for the joke, and that is because this is a Deadpool movie, and that is how we're going to treat these cameos. And I think that it worked mainly because this character, mouthed off against, Cassandra Nova, and his skin was ripped off, and it all tied into the post-credit scene. And when you watch this movie again, I think that joke is going to be so much funnier the second time around, because Deadpool, yeah, sure, he was running his mouth and he did get him killed, but it wasn't because he didn't actually say that. He did actually say all that stuff, and I thought it was really funny to hear Chris Evans say all that stuff in the post-credit scene. But then we get into Cassandra Nova and Baccarin in this movie, and I thought they did a really good job in this film, just being really creepy and really unsettling, and also played really well with the sarcasm that they had against, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in this film. And I thought they were sufficiently creepy. I loved the visual of the powers that this character had of, just sticking their fingers into people's faces and, feeling their brains in a really weird and disturbing way. And I saw some comic panels that showed this is very accurate to how this character is portrayed in the comics. And so I loved all that stuff. I do think that their motivations when it comes to the end of how they wanted to, erase all other realities and just only have the Void left by the end of it, I thought that turn was a little bit quick and not as fleshed out as you could have had with this villain. I do think that, their initial motivations of, they were put into the Void, before they could even walk, and because their powers are so strong, they took over this Void area, and they're very content with having this, and they had a deal with TVA, and when that deal was broken, then sure, yeah, you can go ahead and destroy all of reality. That was all fine, the whole Time Ripper MacGuffin type of thing that they joked about, that's all fine and stuff, but I do think that all that stuff could have been fleshed out just a little bit more. And then we get into the road trip aspect of this movie, and I think if you listen to some interviews with Ryan Reynolds, I think that this movie was initially, I guess, conceptualized as a road trip movie between Deadpool and Wolverine with a lower budget, because they weren't sure if they were going to be able to make this movie made as big as they wanted to. I'm glad that they got to make it as big as they wanted to, but to be completely honest, I think my favorite part of this movie was this road trip section, because we got to one of the most epic fights between Deadpool and Wolverine that we possibly could have ever gotten. I think their initial fight when they first got into the Void was awesome. I think it lived up to all the hype that you possibly could have had with all the, the leaked footage from when they were filming this scene or from, you know, the actual marketing that they had for the movie, and I think this fight really did deliver. But the fact that we got a second one in close quarters inside of their car as they're, you know, driving, and it's all in a Honda Odyssey and all the jokes. I wonder how much Honda had to pay for this car to be featured as heavily as it was in this film, for it to be also trash talked throughout the entire movie, besides the part where, you know, Deadpool says, you know what, the Honda Odyssey actually fucks. Like, it actually is really great by the end of it. I thought that was a really funny joke in general. But this fight, to have these two characters that literally cannot die, that are just, you know, attacking each other and hurting each other in just such violent and just entirely over the top ways, but the fact that they cannot kill each other is such an intriguing and such a just fun sort of way to, I guess, have these characters into a movie and have them fight and have it be as brutal as it was in this film. I thought that those two action sequences are probably the best entire movie, besides maybe the one with the Deadpool Corps at the end of the film. But so much fun that I had watching this scene, that watching both these fight scenes, I thought it very much lived to the potential of a Deadpool Wolverine movie. But let's get into the main, I guess, meat and potatoes of the cameos in this film, and that is with the whole, you know, group of forgotten X-Men, or I guess forgotten Fox, you know, Marvel characters that they had, you know, in previous films. And so of course you had Elektra walk up first, played by Jennifer Garner once again. I never watched the Elektra movie. I honestly want to go back and watch a lot of these, you know, older Marvel movies that I never saw. I actually have Howard the Duck on 4K. I cannot wait to put that into my, you know, PS5 and watch that film. But I need to watch all these other, you know, old, you know, Marvel movies, because they're all in play now. Of course, you have Elektra, you have Daredevil, all these old movies that, you know, I haven't seen before. So I really want to get into those. But Elektra, seeing her in this film was pretty cool. And then Blade was probably one of the biggest surprises that I had. And, you know, I think when you look at these cameos that are in this movie, I think, you know, you'll be very surprised at first glance at some of these people being in the movie. But most of them you'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. To have, you know, Sean Levy directing this film, and to have Free Guy, and you had Chris Evans cameo in that movie as well. To see Chris Evans in this movie, honestly, it's really fun to see that, but I wasn't as surprised by that because I thought that was within reach. I think Elektra also makes sense because I think that was leaked and rumored just, you know, a long time ago as well, and so it just makes sense to bring that character in because I think Jennifer Garner would be game to do something like this. And then you also have Channing Tatum as Gambit, which I thought, you know, at first glance I was completely shocked to see this character, you know, realize on screen with this actor. But also when you think about it, you know, Channing Tatum was also in Free Guy in a cameo of sorts in that film, and had fun playing with, you know, Ryan Reynolds and the characters in that film as well. And so again, to bring him into this movie, it all made sense to me. And to bring, you know, Gambit to life on screen, you know, I actually didn't realize how deep, you know, the Channing Tatum Gambit thing went. You know, I watched a video after I watched the movie to see exactly how far the process got with him being in a movie. I remember hearing about it for years that, you know, Channing Tatum wanted to make a Gambit movie, that the fact that he almost directed one at one point was just really crazy. And the fact that he's actually in this movie as this character, and it's kind of more of a spoof of what it would have been in this movie. Again, I think these cameos are incredibly unserious, and so his accent in this is absolutely ridiculous. His costume is very spot on. He looks very cool. The powers are very much realized, but again, it's kind of a spoof and a joke of what he would have looked like as this character. I think if you're walking out of this movie saying, oh, I think that Channing Tatum absolutely nailed Gambit, I think you're kind of missing the joke of the fact that I think they're kind of making fun of Channing Tatum as Gambit, as well as they're saying that, oh, that maybe could have been awesome at the time that they were originally developing these movies. And so I don't think in the future we'll see Channing Tatum as Gambit probably ever again, but the fact that we got him here was really fun. But you know, all of those made a lot of sense. All those were, I guess, within reach with these filmmakers to be able to bring into the fold of this movie. But again, Blade, completely unexpected. I absolutely love the fact that they got Wesley Snipes to play this character. I think it was unexpected for many reasons. For one, they're developing a Blade movie with Mahershala Ali, and they even joke about the fact that, you know, Wesley Snipes says he's the only Blade, and he'll only ever be the only Blade to, you know, don the silver screen. Obviously, that's probably not going to be the case with that movie being in very much struggling in development, with, you know, several years of development hell that movie has been stuck in. But of course, they're poking fun at that in this movie, which I thought was absolutely crazy. But then you also have the added layer of the fact that Wesley Snipes hated Ryan Reynolds on the set of Blade Trinity. And, you know, these movies I actually have watched before. I think I watched them all last year just for fun. I watched the entire Blade trilogy, and I think the first one is great, the second one is okay, and the third one is god awful. And I think Ryan Reynolds is very much the stereotypical character that Ryan Reynolds usually plays. He's extremely annoying. His jokes are not as funny as they could have been in that film, but you can tell that at least there was beef on set between those two actors, because it just did not work. And so to see him in here was extremely unexpected and really fun. And again, it was very much taken in an unserious way, but I love to see Wesley Snipes back in this role just at least one more time. I doubt we'll see him again in the future, but maybe we will. Maybe we'll see more Wesley Snipes as this character, but if this is the last time that we see him as this character, I think it was a much better ending than what we saw him in Blade Trinity. And then we have X-23, we have Dafne Keen coming back in this role, and I think this, of all the cameos, I think I was the most disappointed in, mainly because of the actual action scene that we saw at the end of this movie, which it was a pretty shaky action scene, but I think you got enough moments with, Blade being cool and Gambit being cool to make it all worth it. You got a little tiny scene with Dafne Keen, taking on Juggernaut in this movie that was a little bit cool, but I don't think we saw nearly enough of her to make that impact really, land. You had a really great conversation between her and this new Wolverine that I thought did work, but I think it kind of undercuts Logan just a little bit, especially if you watch it in the order that I watched it in, which, again, I think those expectations were kind of set at a certain point where, maybe they won't mess with the legacy of Logan. I think that they technically don't mess with the legacy of Logan, but at the same time, I was conflicted to see this character back and to have the role that she had in this film, mainly because I think there was some scheduling conflict with her filming The Acolyte, which, if you haven't seen The Acolyte, she is phenomenal in that show. I think that she had a great, phenomenal action sequence in the 5th episode of that series, and I kind of wish that we got a moment like that in this movie, but, maybe she was filming them at the same time, and she didn't have enough time on set to be able to do the things that she did in the Logan movie, or even in, the Acolyte series to be fully front and center in an action sequence, and so, again, I was a little bit disappointed in her role, but in general, I thought it was really great to see this character back just one more time. And of course, it all culminated in a big action sequence at Nova's base, and you have, them get Juggernaut's helmets and put it on Nova's head, and I really love the back and forth between Emma Corrin and Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds throughout this entire sequence, because again, I think this character of Cassandra Nova is extremely creepy and unsettling, and the fact that, when this helmet was put on their head, and they're basically saying, in order to get home, you have to take this thing off my head, but as soon as you take it off my head, I'm gonna just melt your skin, I'm gonna melt your body, and you're just gonna be dead in an instant, because, this is the type of character that I am. And again, I think the turn of, Pyro coming in and shooting them and having that whole thing where, now they kind of want to see what happens if they let them go home, and you have Alioth coming in really fast from Loki season 1 episode 5, going in really fast to, take them all out, and I thought it was a fun sequence, but again, I think those motivations, that turn was not as earned as you would have had if you spent a little bit more time with Cassandra Nova. But then let's get into the third act of this movie, once our characters jump through the portal and go home, which I think a lot of expectations with fans, saying, where are they going to go going through this, this Doctor Strange portal? The possibilities are endless for this movie. Well, they just go home. That's really all they're doing in this movie. They don't really go into any other universe besides just the Void, which they spend the majority of this movie in, and the main Deadpool universe that you saw in those first 2 movies. And so, yeah, sure, you don't get to play as much in the multiversal, world hopping shenanigans that you got to see in some other projects like Loki in particular, but of course you have the Deadpool Corps, all these different variants of Deadpool that gets pulled into this world at the end of the film, which I absolutely loved. I think Nicepool was also introduced earlier into the film along with Dogpool, but I really loved Nicepool. I thought this was one of the funnier aspects of the movie. I think the fourth wall break that he tried to make, or at least attempted to make, saying the proposal, was extremely funny. That was easily one of the best parts of this movie, but even more funny was the fact that, Deadpool used him as a human shield against all these other Deadpools, knowing the fact that he cannot regenerate. That was so incredibly funny. I think that was easily the funniest joke in this entire movie, and I think Ryan Reynolds, just playing that ragdoll type of guy, just being shot by a million bullets, was incredibly funny. But this action sequence was great. The side-scrolling nature of just it looking like it was ripped right off of a comic book panel or a video game or whatever you want to say this looked like. It was great to see Wolverine, don the cowl that he had in this fight scene was also great, and they really committed to the cowl, because he had it on from this action sequence pretty much to the end of the entire film. He had the mask on, which is really great to see, and I love the fact that they animated his eyes in a very similar way to how they did Deadpool. And a lot of people have been saying that they want Batman to have the white eyes, and I've never really agreed with that. I think that it would look a little bit silly, but if they animate the eyes in this way, I think it actually maybe could work, because I think it did work for both Deadpool and Wolverine in this film. That was extremely fun to see. But I think the things that I'm going to walk away with most after this movie, besides I guess the whole Gambit and Blade thing, which I think those two are going to stick with me for a little while, I think the other things that are going to stick with me with this movie are going to be, the 2 fights between Deadpool and Wolverine and this action sequence against the Deadpool Corps. I absolutely loved that entire thing. Headpool was cool, the whole joke with with them all loving, Peter at the end of the entire fight was really funny. The whole Nice Bowl thing of him getting slaughtered in this movie in a very just brutal way. Again, that is so funny to me. And so all that stuff I think really did live up to the hype. And it wasn't, the cliche thing with all these other multiversal stories where you have, an on your left moment where you have a bunch of Deadpools fight against Cassandra Nova. I think they could have easily gone in that direction, but no, it's Deadpool and Wolverine fighting against this entire legion of other Deadpools. I thought that worked a little bit better than if they were on their side. But then we get back to Paradox and everything that's happened with Cassandra Nova and, using this time ripper to unravel the reality that was, Deadpool's reality. And you have the spaghettification that you saw in Loki season 2, which I thought was really great to see some of those visuals come over into the big screen. I love all that stuff. And of course, you have a very Guardians of the Galaxy type of ending where you have Deadpool and Wolverine hold hands and they take the power to be able to destroy this thing so they don't get, eviscerated if they were doing it alone. I love the fact that you had the great song choice. I think the soundtrack in general was really great in this movie, but you had a great song choice here at the end. You saw, Wolverine's just shirt rip off. And again, this movie is incredibly unserious. I think a lot of this stuff kind of undercuts the drama of the moment. But again, it is a Deadpool movie. You have to expect stuff like this in a film that is, starring a character like Deadpool. It was extremely funny. And the fact that you got that same one random TVA guy that was kind of obsessively looking at Deadpool at the beginning of the movie, now he's obsessively looking at Wolverine's abs at the end of this movie, I thought was, again, another really funny joke. When he got Wolverine's cowl, that was, again, another really funny moment. I love this random guy. Like, it's so incredibly random. But they save the day, and you have Hunter B-15, come into play and say that, oh, you actually did save your universe, and it's actually, thriving now. It's not, fading away into obscurity anymore. And you end the movie off with Wolverine staying in this reality. And, I think in terms of the character arcs of this film, you had the whole Deadpool thing with, breaking up with VANESSA, and you have, I guess, the motivation just being, I want a greater purpose in this universe. He went to, Jon Favreau was happy at the beginning of the movie, saying that he wanted to be in the Avengers, and, Happy Hogan just saying that, you need to shoot a little bit lower. You're looking too high. You don't have that greater sense of purpose. And this whole movie shows that maybe he does have a greater sense of purpose because he saw Thor holding him in his arms crying, which is not paid off in this movie. I'm sure we'll get a payoff for that in like 6 years in some Avengers movie. But either way, I think that, this character arc that he went on of trying to find a greater purpose, I thought was okay. I think it was a little bit thin. I can say honestly the same thing with Wolverine's arc in this movie of being the worst Wolverine. Of course, he caused the death of everyone. Well, not really caused the death. I think he kind of just got drunk and was just kind of off at a bar when the humans came and killed all the rest of the X-Men, and then he showed back up and was very, distraught by all that. All the guilt that he faced, led him to go on the slaughter and killed a bunch of humans, a bunch of, bad people, a bunch of innocent people as well, and all this, which made him, look frowningly, like everybody else looking down on him, of just being this sort of, I guess, shameful X-Men character in his own universe. And to, have the storyline of him, I guess, all this pain and all this struggle that he had in the past is what made him the Wolverine that you need to be able to be the hero in this film. And so I like that arc a decent amount. Again, I think it was a little bit thin. It wasn't nearly anywhere as, I guess, impactful as something that was in Logan. I think the strongest moment with Wolverine in this movie was the fact right before the car sequence where he's just, ripping Deadpool into shreds, and Deadpool doesn't even have a funny quip to say afterwards. And they really got into it in that argument, in that fight scene that they had. And I think that was easily the strongest, at least dramatic moment with these character arcs that we had in this entire movie. But again, it's a Deadpool movie. These arcs are not taken very seriously, which is a little bit unfortunate because I think they were taken a little bit more seriously in the previous 2 Deadpool films. But that is how we wrap up this movie. We have a really fun Fast and Furious style dinner scene at the end of the film where all the characters are together. You have even Dafne Keen as, X-23 back in the main universe. And, I think you can also, just to, I guess, kind of nitpick here for a second, is this the same X-23 that was in the Logan movie? Because if so, then the Deadpool universe is in the same universe as, the Logan movie, which means that all the other X-Men in that entire universe is dead because Charles killed the rest of the X-Men. So I guess in this existence, you have X-23 maybe be pruned by the TVA at some point in between the events of Deadpool 2 and Logan, and then to the events of this film. And then obviously you had the whole encounterment in the Void and maybe brought X-23 back into this universe. And so is it the same X-23? Is it not the same X-23? Is the rest of the X-Men dead in this universe? Which I think if they did go that route, that's actually kind of sad that, the entire universe that we knew and love from the other X-Men movies is just dead because of Logan. I don't know. I just, again, a little nitpicks. I don't think that really matters, but to see them all happy at the end of the movie it's a happy ending. You know, it is what it is. But you know, that is Deadpool and Wolverine. And of course, you got the post-credit sequence, which, you know, showed the whole thing with Chris Evans, which I thought was really funny. And then the whole montage of all the other X-Men movies, all the other Fox movies that was throughout the entire last, like, however many, like 20 plus years that we had all these films. That was really lovely to see. I loved all that stuff. But I think in general, I think this is a decent movie when it comes to the character arcs and the stories of Deadpool and Wolverine. I think it's a good MCU movie with the whole tie-in with the TVA, and I think it's a great Marvel movie with all the love that it had for the Fox universe. But those are going to be my thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm very curious to hear what you guys thought of this movie in the comment section down below. And did you guys love it? Were you guys disappointed? Did you guys love the cameos? Were you guys disappointed in the cameos? Did you like it more than Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness? Honestly, I think I do like it a little bit more than Multiverse of Madness, but I also do love Multiverse of Madness more than most people, so I think they're actually pretty even in terms of how I would rank them. And I think in general, in terms of the Deadpool movies, I do think that this movie is a little bit better than Deadpool 2, but not nearly as good as the original Deadpool movie. I think that movie was truly lightning in a bottle, but I'm really excited to see what they do with this character moving forward. I really want them to do a Deadpool 4 and to actually, you know, dive into the original cast of those movies and to have an actual satisfying ending with, you know, Morena Baccarin's character and with, you know, Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Colossus and all those other people that we came to know and love in those films. I don't know if we will actually see that come into fruition, but I hope we do get another Deadpool movie that focuses a little bit more on the story at hand, or at least the characters at hand that, you know, was created in these Deadpool movies. But I guess we'll see what they do with that and with this character joining the Avengers and being in Avengers Secret Wars or whatever he's going to be in, to be in a situation where he's held by Thor, whatever is going to happen with all that. I'm excited to see all that. But again, comment down below with your thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. And if you did enjoy this video, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I have reviews out for Oddity, which is a really interesting horror movie that was released last week, along with Twisters. Please, for the love of God, please watch my Twisters review. I have a conspiracy theory that's, you know, YouTube absolutely hates Glenn Powell for some reason, because my two worst videos in the past, like, I guess, you know, several months on the channel are my review for Hitman and my review for Twisters. Those videos got absolutely no views, so if that video can get a little boost, I would love to see that as well. I've even changed the thumbnail like 3 times. I've had a journey with that review, but that's a whole different story. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like I said, comment down below, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I hope to see you all in my next one. And be nice to those theater employees. They deserve it.